Hello there, it's Gina Gardiner here and welcome to Gina Gardiner and Friends. As always, I've got a hugely wonderful guest for you, and today my guest is Craig Goldbatt. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Gina. Thanks very much. It's lovely to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Oh, a pleasure. Let me just tell you a little bit about Craig. He's passionate about global change. He inspires us to contribute beyond ourselves for the greater good. He wholeheartedly believes that as we grow ourselves, we naturally impact on all others. And he's got an amazing CV. He's spoken at over 700 events on 5 continents to hundreds of thousands of people worldwide. And I feel very, very privileged to have him as a friend on my show. So, Craig, what got you into all of this? I mean, how do you become such an amazing keynote speaker and have that level of impact around the world?
Oh, thank you. So as you asked me that question, there's a number of different things, but maybe I'll give a very brief potted history in that. I'm 49 now. I was born in South Africa. My parents decided to emigrate from South Africa in '77 to the UK. I studied in Surrey and then I went as a foot soldier into sales, ran some sales teams in my 20s, and I got to 29, Gina, and I realized that my only true gift, at least in the commercial world, was it inspiring the sales guys I was working with.
Okay.
And so I realized that my gift was in communication, and I had no idea at that time that professional speaking existed. And I went on some courses and learned from the great and the good. And I was very lucky to go to America and India and study some NLP and some psychology work and how we tick internally. And so that's what really got me into it, is I realized at the end of my 20s that I was a communicator by heart. That's in my blood. And that came from my parents. My dad was a wonderful orator. He was a lecturer of constitutional law, and my mum was a charity worker and just followed her dreams from her heart. And so really it came from my parents, in essence, from an emotional perspective, but physically it came from the fact that my only gift really is in communication.
I'm not sure that's true, that's your only gift. I have to say it's a significant gift.
A significant gift, okay, yes.
Because communication is the vehicle.
Yes.
Okay, so you can have the most amazing car outside, 59,000 horsepower. But if it's not got the fuel and it's not going anywhere, all it is a piece of tin.
Yes.
So what's the message?
So in essence, I wholeheartedly believe that we live as human beings. We live in 2 worlds, not one. We don't have one planet, we have 2 planets. And what I mean by that is we have an external world and an internal world. And I think through both my parents and I guess myself, my ecology, my background, my ancestry, whatever we want to call it, spiritually or physically, I'm a very emotional bunny, and I always have felt very, very deeply about life and about our soul and about our human emotions. And I also believe that our body is our home. Our home is not made of bricks and mortar. As the Dalai Lama says, our body is our only home. Yeah. And I think I've always known that, even as a young child. I've always followed my heart and wore my heart on my sleeve. And my heart is my deepest wisdom. And it doesn't mean that I don't make big mistakes. Of course I do, but I follow, I've always felt that I follow my heart, my soul, as much as I allow myself to. And that's helped me on this journey of speaking. And you know what, actually, as I talk to you, I've been, like all of us have, we're often asked this question, who are we?
Yeah.
And I've always felt I'm a passionate person, I'm a passionate adventurer. But recently I've realized that another gift that I have is curiosity, is what's allowed me to speak and run workshops and coach people. Is I've got an innate gift in being curious. I'm really curious about what makes us tick. And that's probably the most important thing, I suppose, when we work in this field, is to be deeply curious about what makes people tick.
Isn't it interesting? I've just written an article today, and the title of it is that curiosity offers us the greatest shift.
Yes, it's
And
very true.
by that I mean that, you know, we tend to be habitual animals. We have habitual patterns of thinking and action and language.
Yes.
And unless we're aware of how those patterns are running and what is the fuel behind them, our beliefs, we're powerless to do anything about it.
Yeah,
By
absolutely.
being curious about what's going on and why we're reacting in a particular way, we have the opportunity to do things differently, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're open to our own sense of self and also others, and then we can shift, we can change, we can grow. They say that the person with the most flexibility has the most power. But the thing, Gina, that I'd love to share with in what we've talked about so far, and I've realized this more and more during the coronavirus pandemic, and even more actually, I know we're not globally out of the pandemic, but in England, we're almost, most of us are fortunate enough to be living normal lives again. The biggest thing that's important in our sense of self and our communication, our ability to communicate with ourselves and others, is our childlike energy, is to be a child again. And I'm actually working a lot on looking to be a better tennis player at the moment. And I've gone back to some wonderful books and audio programs like The Inner Game of Tennis from Tim Galway and these kind of books. And all of these great, coaches and speakers that I've been privileged enough to learn from, they all say different things, but the same thing. And the thing that resonates throughout all of my learnings is that we have to foster this childlike dance, this childlike energy of imagination. Einstein said imagination is more powerful than knowledge. And I don't want to say we've lost it, because we haven't, but sometimes we forget our childlike energy.
What for you is the difference between being childlike and childish? And why is it important to make the distinction, do you think?
So to me, we are, as we grow up, we connect to what they call our 3 levels of intelligence, obviously our head, our heart, and our gut instinct. And we obviously create an ability to be able to make adult decisions and to take on responsibilities and to start seeing life more as it is, as it truly is for us. And we want those responsibilities. And that to me is about adulthood, is about seeing what our responsibilities are and grabbing, with courage, our opportunities and facing our fears. The difference to me between being childish and childlike is, childish to me is not being willing to look myself, in the mirror and say, what are my fears? How am I dealing with them? And blaming others for my miscomings. That's childish, is to say, and judging others, that's childish. And I still step into childish.
I think we all do at times.
And so, as you ask me that great question, and as I explore it in my own mind, childish in one word is judgment. Mm-hmm. Is judging others and judging the world and judging myself. And judging is acid, it's toxic. And it's different to responsibility or standards. It's blaming. Judging is blaming. And so childlike is a lack of judgment, but as you said before, it's a dance, it's fun, it's expression, it's love, it's recognizing beauty. And the most of all, encompassing all that I've just shared in our dance, is presence. I think when you see a healthy childlike energy in a 7-year-old, they're in the moment at all times. They're living life, and they're looking at a tree, and suddenly they're a soldier, and then they're a fighter, and then they're a lover, and then they're a prince or a princess, and they're exploring their imagination and learning and growing and creating and making dreams. come true in themselves and for their future. And that is childlike.
I think that's a really great description. I think, you know, if you're listening to this, just think about if you have watched a child go through the woods, and how a very young child will pick up a leaf and they will look at it as if it is an absolutely precious jewel.
Yes.
They'll turn it over. They are curious about the markings on it. They're not thinking this is an old leaf. They are thinking this is something magical. And I think one of the issues that we have within the world at the moment, particularly if you listen to the news and you focus on all of the dreadful things that are going on, it's very easy to lose that sense of awe and wonder. And the natural world, for me, that's where I fill my soul up. That's where I feel most childlike, in that I'm sitting looking at my courtyard, for example, and there's the most beautiful magnolia tree with deep purpley pink flowers. And, you know, 2 weeks ago, there was nothing on the tree. And
Right.
that for me is a miracle, and it's magic.
Yes.
And I think if you look at childish, we look at our politicians, for example, and I don't want to get into party politics, but you often see exhibited by world leaders and by business leaders some very childish behavior, you know, where they're stamping their foot and they're throwing their toys out their pram. And it keeps us stuck when we get into that energy, whereas when we are in our childlike energy, we open the door to possibility. And I think that's the magic of it, that awe and wonder and being curious about what's going on has that capacity to open the door of possibility.
And that possibility to me is driven by one thing most of all, which is what's our intent? What's our intention as we wake up in the morning and hopefully have these dreams of possibility? What really grounds us to possibility is our sense of intention. And to me, intent is almost everything. Is if our intention is to live today with love,
yeah,
you have to have difficult conversations and even ask somebody to leave our business or have a very difficult conversation. If our intention is driven to love everybody today and be a light, if you like, spiritually, or look after ourselves, whatever it is, be healthy. If we have a good intent, that's what people recognize. That's what people are attracted to. Human beings are attracted to our intention. At the very, I know this is overused, but it's still true, is that when we look at Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa, all these leaders of the heart, if you like, their intention was very clear through everything that they did. And I think that's always important for us and for me to look to emulate, is that my sense of intent for myself and others, and that helps us to stay light and live a heart-driven life.
I think that's absolutely true. What strikes me, I was a principal for over 20 years, a head teacher for over 20 years, and I had nearly 100 staff. And one of the things that I recognized is that you could have really challenging conversations if the relationship was based on love. And I know lots of people think that was pink and fluffy, but I think when you truly love someone, you want the best for them and from them.
Yes.
And if people recognize that that is your intent, that it isn't a bartering type of love, it's come up in a number of interviews that, you know, how often relationships are based on, I'll be nice to you if you, but if it comes from a place of unconditional love, actually it's quite tough because you expecting that person to be the best they can be.
Yes.
And then you can have those hard conversations in a way that's purely developmental and is taken on board in that way, rather than you having a go at me.
Yes, that's exactly right. I listened this morning again to Johnny Wilkinson, the great rugby player, and Dave Alred, who wrote the Pressure Principle. And Dave Alred was mentioning in his podcast with Johnny Wilkinson about this very subject, about our ability to stand next to somebody and have that intention to understand them and be curious and and hold that space for them, rather than coach or train in front of somebody to walk with them. And that was really profound for me to hear this just this morning, is that for me to learn again to stand next or sit next to somebody rather than facing them in every way and expect something from them, just to be curious, whether it's pain or love or whatever, fear, whatever it is, to sit with them rather than expect them to see me in front of them.
I think also I'd add to that your earlier point, that sitting next to them, but without the judgment, the shoulds, the musts, the shouldn'ts, but just to recognize that's where they are.
Yes.
I think that becomes very powerful. That's not to say, again, that the expectation is that you want the best from them and for them, but ultimately it's not about their good or bad, it's just where they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Started, our talk about there being this internal and external part of us. Do you want to just explain what you mean by that to our listeners and give them a sense of where you're coming from?
Yes, so I feel wholeheartedly that I speak as myself. That's the best way for me to be able to explain this, is that I've been growing for over 200,000 years. This is my belief. From an evolutionary perspective, I wasn't, born just as a plain piece of paper, if you like. I come into this world with an enormous amount of genetics from my ancestors. And so my internal world is the whole of my body, my skeletal system, my muscular system, my neurological system, all my organs, my beliefs, my values, my identity, my culture, my purpose, my intention, my behaviors, that's all in me. So I have 30 trillion cells apparently in my body. All of that is developed over a couple of 100,000 years. That's my internal world. And I guess it's millions of years old. Many people say that we came from, millions and millions of years ago, we started to evolve as human beings. And that's my internal world. And then we have our external world, which if I'm not clever enough to understand much of quantum physics, but what I understand to be true is that the outside world is like we are, I guess. It's full of energy. It's a planet full of energy. And our external world is full of all sorts of species and flora and fauna and media and technology. And the planet's full of stimulus. And I think the difference is, for me, is that our internal world is what we experience with our five senses. It's what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we taste, and what we smell. That gives us a bridge from our internal world to the external world. So the external world actually is an image that we can relate to based on our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, what we smell, and what we taste. And the other thing that is different to me between our internal and external world, and I'm generalizing hugely and maybe even distorting the truth slightly when I say this, because I don't know if this is wholly true, is that I'm only able to change my internal world. I have no real control over the external world. Yes. I only have myself. That's all I was born with. That's what I'm going to die with. This is a whole world, a universe inside myself. And it's an operating system that to a degree I have control over. I can look at things differently. I can think differently. I can feel differently. I can be interested in that. I can change where I walk, my behaviors. My internal world, to a degree, I'm in control of. My external world, I need to be curious about and observe. So, I don't know how good that answer is, but that's how I see it.
I think it's a hugely important starting point. Our beliefs, for example, drive the way in which we interpret the world. And I think so much of the external world as we interpret it is down to our perception based on our beliefs and our experience.
Yes.
And people make their perception the truth. This is right, and that makes you wrong.
Yes.
Now, I think I've already said, I'm sitting here looking out of my courtyard, but if I was in my courtyard looking into my garden room, I would have a very different perspective.
Yes.
And that shift in perspective, and that being prepared to question the perspective that we are interpreting, I think gives us such power. So we'll interpret the world in one way. Let me give you an example. I was talking to somebody the other day and they were really, really cross. A good friend of theirs, they'd been walking down the road, and a good friend of theirs, they'd waved and said hi, and the other person had ignored them. And they had assumed that either they'd done something to upset them, or that other person was being huffy and rude. And I just said to them, have you thought that they might just be completely absorbed in their to-do list, or there may be a problem, somebody could be ill? You know, your assumption of their motive based on your perspective is more to do with your internal landscape than the reality, because you have no idea.
No.
But we make those judgments all the time. And if you're someone who wants to see a slight in the way which other people behave, that will become your reality.
Yes.
If you intrinsically look for the best in people, generally speaking, most people will show you their best side.
Yes. And it, to me, you know, I'm learning a lot listening to you today. And one of the things that I've just picked up on is I've learned something in my journey, if you like, in my learning journey, about the circle of how beliefs are created. Yes. And you're absolutely right. For me, you're absolutely right in saying that beliefs are the foundation of everything. And I, like so many of us, I've struggled, I think that's okay to say this, I've struggled with religion sometimes, and the beliefs that sit it within religion. And I've got a new friend in my life that I've only had for a couple of years, and he's a vicar. And just the other day I sat and had lunch with him, and it's really amazing for me I spend a lot of time with him now, and I'm exploring his belief systems and my belief systems. And it's the first time really I've had the courage to be able to really explore this rather than have a fear around it, to be able to explore his whole belief system without judgment. And I'm learning so much I can't even begin to tell you. It doesn't mean that tomorrow I'm going to believe Judaism's right or Christianity's right, but I'm finally at a place where I can sit without judgment and just be purely curious as to what all of our beliefs teach us. And that's such a powerful place. And it's taken me I'm a bit cross with myself really, but it's taken me 49 years to get to the place where I'm this open.
So can I just gently say to you, being cross with yourself is a huge judgment. It is what it is.
Yes, absolutely right. And I'm definitely not judgment.
And it's interesting for me, you know, our beliefs become our reality, and most people don't challenge them.
No.
But when you do, things happen. Roger Bannister, for example, 4-minute miler, first 4-minute miler, was told by the powers that be, the doctors of the time, if you run that fast, you'll die.
Yes.
And if you look at the footage, there are people with the oxygen bottles ready to help him. Yes. That he ran that fast, I find amazing. But what really strikes me is within 1 month, 30 other people had run as fast. Why?
Exactly.
Because they believed it possible.
They believed it possible. 100%. And that's a great metaphor for all of us. He's a great metaphor for all of us. And to be able to challenge the status quo in that way. And another piece for me was, again, with hopefully no judgment, but I'm sure there's a little bit of judgment there somewhere. About 6 years ago, I became a plant-based eater, a vegan. I'm not purely a vegan, I don't think, because I'm still wearing leather and, you know, shoes. But I'm eating plant-based and I'm on that journey. And the reason why I mention that is I went on a course 15 years ago that taught me, for me, it was wrong to eat meat. And it took me 15 years to take that belief and take action on it. And that's a bit of a long time for somebody to, but what's so powerful is if we allow ourselves to imagine or have the right intention for ourselves and be open to change, it's amazing how that trust, once we have trust that we can change, it's amazing in the future that the opportunities show up for us. The universe helps us with that and says, well, there you go, there's another opportunity for you to be able to change. It's just about us being open and childlike and imagine and dream and to be willing to explore without judgment our own sense of belief systems and others and not judge them. And then we can change.
Such a powerful way to end the show. Thank you so much for joining me. I think we're going to have another conversation in another show because I think we've just scratched the surface. So thank you so much for joining me. Thanks, Craig. It's been a delight.
Thank you so much, Gina.
Have a great week and we'll see you on the next show. Bye-bye now.